for the humans.
Move! Get to the line, now!
The virile throne room shimmered with gold and cruelty. The Emperor sat upon his iron dais, voice dripping venom as he mocked the humans who had dared to offer aid to his failing fleets. They think themselves indispensable, he hissed to his council, his eyes narrowing with bitter amusement. Let them taste what we think of their charity. Around him, nobles laughed, their jeweled armor glinting beneath the cold light of twin suns. And when he raised his clawed hand, silence fell. Send them a gift, he said. My daughter. Gasps echoed. Whispers rippled like acid through the chamber. Everyone knew of her, Sura, the Emperor's shame, soft-bodied and slow, unfit for war or command, born with compassion instead of hunger for power. The courtiers snickered openly, bowing low to hide their smirks. An appropriate insult, my lord, one of them said. The Emperor's grin was thin and cruel. Let them see what becomes of those who beg for our favor. When they brought her forward, she kept her eyes low, shoulders trembling beneath the weight of her father's disdain. You will go to them, he said, and serve as a reminder of their place. The humans like fixing broken things. Let's see if they can fix you. The court erupted in laughter, but she did not cry. She only bowed her head, as if already broken. Light years away, a human repair station orbited a dying blue star. It was a patchwork of steel and scars, the kind of place that kept the galaxy running while no one thanked it. Among its grease-streaked corridors worked Elias Grant, a man known not for his rank but for his hands. He fixed what others called lost causes, ships that had burned out, engines that had screamed their last. His knuckles were cracked, his voice low, his patience endless. He was what the galaxy forgot it still needed, someone who didn't throw things away. When the Emperor's ship arrived, the hangar fell silent. Out stepped the envoy, all arrogance and polished armor, followed by the girl. Green skin dulled with dust, eyes avoiding every gaze. The soldiers laughed under their breath. The Emperor sends his daughter, the envoy sneered. A token of goodwill and pity. Then they left her there, standing small in the vast hangar, the sound of the departing ship echoing like a cruel farewell. Elias walked forward, wiping his hands on his jumpsuit. He expected some envoy, some official, not this. Her clothes were torn, her hair tangled, her face streaked with humiliation. She flinched as he approached, expecting mockery. But he only looked at her the way a craftsman looks at a dented tool, measuring what can still be saved. He handed her a blanket without a word. You hungry? He asked finally. She blinked, unsure she had heard him right. I require no. Everyone requires something, he interrupted. Come on. In the mess hall, she sat stiffly, her hands trembling around a tin cup. Around them, humans whispered but didn't laugh. They'd seen too much of war and ruin to find cruelty amusing. Elias sat opposite her, eating quietly, not staring, not speaking more than necessary. When she hesitated to touch the food, he nodded toward the plate. Eat. You're safe here. She picked up a piece of bread, studied it as if it were a relic. Why? She asked softly. He looked up. Why what? Why are you being kind? He shrugged. Because someone has to be. That night she sat in a corner of the maintenance bay, watching him work. Sparks danced around him as he welded a broken joint on a damaged transport engine. His movements were deliberate, methodical, patient. There was no waste, no anger, only focus. To her, it was almost sacred. In the Dominion, weakness meant exile, imperfection meant destruction. Yet here, a man poured care into something that would have been melted down without a second thought. You fix broken things, she murmured, her voice almost lost under the hum of machinery. He didn't look up. That's the job. In the reflection of the metal hull, she saw her own face, dirt-streaked and tired. And if something's too broken? Then you take more time, he said simply. Days passed, and she learned the rhythm of the station. Humans were loud, unrefined, and stubbornly kind. They didn't measure worth by beauty or rank, they measured it by effort, by hands that worked until they bled. She tried to help, fumbling with tools too small for her thick fingers, dropping bolts, apologizing too much. No one mocked her. Elias just smiled. You'll get it. Everyone does. In time, she did. She learned to listen to the hum of engines, to feel when a system was wrong before the alarms sounded. The first time she fixed a circuit on her own, she looked at him uncertainly, expecting him to take over. Instead, he inspected it, nodded once, and said, "Good work." No one had ever said that to her before. The words hit harder than she expected. Later, she found herself alone, staring at her reflection in a pool of coolant water. The woman looking back still carried the same body the Empire despised, but her hands were no longer trembling. There was grease on her palms, strength in her shoulders. She didn't feel beautiful, but she felt useful. And for the first time in her life, that felt like enough. When Elias passed by, he didn't notice the tears slipping down her cheek. Or maybe he did and chose not to mention it. He just handed her a spanner and said, "I need another pair of hands on the coolant rig." She took it. "Yes, mechanic." "Elias," he corrected. "We don't do titles here." In the distance, the dying star pulsed faintly against the void, like a heart refusing to stop. The station was quiet, save for the endless rhythm of repair, the language of human persistence. And somewhere deep inside, Sura felt the smallest spark of warmth, fragile but real. The galaxy could laugh all it wanted. She had seen something they hadn't, the quiet strength of a species that never gave up on anything, machines, people, or lost causes. And she began to wonder, for the first time, if maybe that was what it meant to be truly strong. The Emperor's joke had been cruel. But in the silence of the human workshop, amid the hum of engines and the scent of oil, his cruelty had become something else, an ember of connection neither of them had expected. And as Elias worked beside her, humming softly to himself, she realized that the man who fixed broken things was already repairing something far greater. Her heart. The days bled into each other, measured not by sunrises but by the steady rhythm of engines coming back to life. The human station was a place of constant motion, steam, sparks, metal ringing under the labor of those who refused to let anything die quietly. Sura watched them work, at first from the edges, her hands clasped behind her back, unsure of her place. The humans didn't stare anymore. Curiosity had passed, replaced by acceptance that she was simply there, like any other worker. Elias didn't treat her differently. He gave orders, short and practical, expecting her to follow. It wasn't mockery, it was trust. He taught without speeches. When a coolant pipe burst, he handed her a clamp and pointed. When a valve jammed, he nodded toward the wrench. He didn't ask if she could do it. He assumed she could, and somehow she did. The first time she stripped a thread, he just took the wrench, fixed the angle, and passed it back. "You'll feel it when it's right," he said, voice calm. "Machines talk if you listen." It was strange to her, this way of learning through failure without punishment. In the Empire, one mistake meant disgrace. Here, a mistake was part of the process. She began to listen, not just to the machines but to the humans themselves. They joked, argued, and cursed, but beneath it all was a quiet loyalty, to the work, to each other. They took pride in the small victories, an engine starting on the first try, a system stabilizing, a day without alarms. One evening, when the hum of the generators was the only sound, Sura stood beside Elias as he calibrated a damaged drone. The room smelled of oil and ozone. "Why do you care so much about fixing things?" she asked. He didn't look up. "Because everything breaks eventually. The only question is whether you walk away or try again." She thought about that long after he left the workshop. In her world, broken things were discarded. Broken people were erased. She had been both. Yet these humans, the so-called primitives, believed nothing was beyond repair. It was a strange kind of faith, not in gods, but in effort. Slowly, she began to change. Her shoulders straightened. Her movements grew steadier. The other mechanics started to rely on her strength, calling her when bolts refused to move or panels jammed. She was still clumsy, but she was needed, and that feeling filled a hollow she hadn't realized existed. One night, a supply drone malfunctioned and crashed into the lower bay. The crew scrambled, alarms blaring. Elias barked orders, his voice cutting through the chaos. Sura dove into the smoke, hauling debris aside, ignoring the heat biting into her skin. They pulled 2 men out, coughing but alive. When it was over, Elias found her sitting on the floor, covered in ash. "You okay?" he asked. She looked up dazed. "I didn't think," she admitted. "I just moved." "That's the best kind of thinking," he said. For the first time, she laughed, a short, startled sound that seemed foreign even to her. Elias smiled faintly. "Told you. You're one of us now." The words struck her harder than any insult ever had. One of us. No one had ever said that to her before. Not her kin, not her court, not even her mother. It was a phrase that didn't belong to royalty or bloodlines, it belonged to belonging itself. After that, she worked harder. She began taking notes on the schematics, asking questions about power distribution and magnetic flow. Elias answered every one, sometimes with diagrams, sometimes with a grunt and a gesture. He wasn't a teacher, but he made her want to learn. He didn't see her as the Emperor's daughter. To him, she was just another mechanic trying to keep the station breathing. One quiet cycle, she found him repairing a cracked fusion coil, sweat dripping from his temples. Without a word, she stepped beside him and began helping, handing him tools before he asked. They worked in silence until the coil sealed and the system stabilized. The hum returned, steady and strong. Elias leaned back, exhaling. "You've got good instincts," he said. "Instincts?" she repeated, almost disbelieving. "Yeah. You listen to the machine. Most people just fight it." She smiled slightly. "I used to fight everything. And now? Now I fix what I can." Elias nodded, satisfied. "That's all any of us do." Later, she sat alone near the viewport, staring at the swirling blue of the dying star beyond. Her reflection in the glass looked different, not thinner, not transformed, but alive. Her body still bore the weight her people despised, but her eyes burned with purpose. She remembered the court's laughter, her father's sneer, the cruel way they had called her a burden. Now she knew the truth. They had never seen her. Not really. But Elias had. Not through pity or desire, but recognition. In the following weeks, she started creating her own designs. Simple modifications, nothing grand, an improved cooling loop, a more efficient vent system. Elias looked them over and gave a slow nod. "Not bad," he said. "You think like an engineer." Her throat tightened. "I thought only humans could become engineers." He smirked. "We don't care what species you are. If it works, it works." That night she dreamed for the first time, not of home, not of fear, but of light spilling from repaired machines, of laughter echoing in metal halls. She dreamed of hands, human hands, her own hands, building instead of breaking. Word began to spread among the crew about how she'd saved the supply team, how she'd modified systems that had baffled even the veterans. The whispers changed tone, from curiosity to respect. She didn't know how to react to it, but when Elias caught her avoiding the compliments, he just said, "Don't run from it. You earned it." She hesitated. "Why do you believe in me?" He paused before answering. "Because you do the work. That's enough." Simple words, but they struck deep. In the Empire, worth came from bloodline. Here, it came from action. Every bolt tightened, every wire reconnected, each one was a step toward reclaiming herself. Sometimes she caught herself smiling while she worked. The laughter of the humans didn't hurt anymore. It invited her in. She began teasing them back, even laughing when they made jokes about her strength. It wasn't mockery now, it was camaraderie. Elias watched quietly, a faint pride in his eyes. He never said it aloud, but she could feel it. He had found something precious in her presence too, someone who understood the beauty of building, of mending what others had given up on. One evening, as the shift ended, she lingered by the workshop door. "Elias," she said softly. He looked up from his tools. "You fix broken things," she whispered, her voice trembling. "Even broken people." He looked at her for a long moment, expression unreadable. Then he said quietly, "That's what makes us human." And as the lights dimmed across the station, she realized something she'd never dared to before. The Emperor had sent her away to humiliate humanity. But all he had done was give her to the only people in the galaxy who knew how to turn shame into strength. The humans had given her a gift no throne could ever offer, a purpose, and a place where she finally belonged. The galaxy whispered before it screamed. News traveled fast among the Dominion. The Emperor's gift had not rotted in obscurity as he'd hoped. Reports spoke of a human station that had taken the castaway princess and, instead of mocking her, turned her into something dangerous, an engineer, a builder, a mind unshackled from shame. The courtiers laughed behind closed doors, pretending not to be afraid. But the Emperor saw the truth behind the rumors. The humans hadn't just accepted his joke, they turned it into strength. That, to him, was the greatest insult of all. He called for his council, his voice trembling with fury. "She was sent to disgrace them," he hissed. "Now they sing her name?" The nobles didn't dare answer. Hollow screens flickered, showing intercepted footage of Sura standing beside humans, her hands blackened with grease, her eyes alive with purpose. "The humans call her engineer," one aide muttered. The Emperor's claws dug into the arm of his throne until metal groaned. "Enough," he said. "Bring her home. I will end this farce myself." When the message reached the human outpost, Elias read it in silence. The hologram of the Dominion envoy flickered in the dusty air. "By command of the Emperor, the traitor Sura Viral is to be returned immediately for judgment. Failure to comply will be considered an act of rebellion." The recording ended. The room stayed quiet except for the faint hum of the generators. Sura stood near the back, her face pale, her breathing shallow. "He'll kill me," she whispered. "He'll make an example of me for what I've done." Elias folded the message chip and set it on the table. "You're not going anywhere." She shook her head violently. "You don't understand. The Dominion doesn't make requests. If you keep me here, they'll come with warships. Then they'll find out what a mechanic can do," he said simply. Sura's voice trembled. "You'll die for nothing. I'm not worth that." He looked at her, calm, steady, unyielding. "Maybe not to them. But to us you are." Word spread across the outpost quickly. Some crew members argued they should hand her over to avoid a fight. Others stood with Elias, anger burning in their eyes. "We don't sell out our own," a pilot growled. Humans were used to being underestimated, used to standing against odds that didn't make sense. And now, one of them was an alien woman who had become part of that same stubborn spirit. Within hours, Dominion ships appeared on long-range sensors, sleek, silver arcs slicing through the void. The air in the command center grew heavy as tension settled over the crew. Sura watched the radar display, her heart pounding. "They won't stop," she said. "They don't know mercy." Elias leaned against the console, arms crossed. "Neither do we." He ordered the outpost into lockdown, engineering bays sealed, systems fortified. The humans weren't soldiers, but they were survivors. They reinforced hulls, rerouted power grids, and armed their mining drones with improvised weapons. Every system had Sura's fingerprints on it, her designs, her adjustments, her touch. The machines hummed differently now, faster, sharper, alive with purpose. When the first transmission came from the Dominion flagship, it was the Emperor himself. His image filled the chamber, towering and cold. "Human," he said, voice heavy with disgust. "You harbor what belongs to me. Return her, and your primitive station will be spared." Elias stepped forward. "She doesn't belong to you." The Emperor's eyes narrowed. "You dare defy me?" "Not defying," Elias said. "Just refusing." The transmission cut, and silence followed. Outside, space rippled as Dominion warships positioned themselves. The humans had minutes at most. Sura trembled beside the console, guilt etched into every movement. "He'll destroy you all," she whispered. "Because of me." Elias turned to her, his voice low but steady. "You've seen how humans fight, right?" "I've seen your wars," she said. "You're reckless." He smiled faintly. "No. We're relentless." She didn't understand until she saw how calm the crew remained. Fear was there, yes, but beneath it was something older, resolve. Humans had faced extinction before. They didn't bow easily. Even now, with death hanging over them, they still cracked jokes, still worked, still prepared. That was what made them terrifying. Sura wanted to beg him to surrender, to stop this before it began, but the words stuck. Part of her, the part that had lived in chains, wanted to hide. But another part, the one that had learned to build, refused to break again. The Dominion fleet sent another message, final warning. Elias ignored it. Instead, he told Sura to stay in the engineering bay. "If anything happens," he said, "you run the systems. Keep them alive." She nodded slowly, though her hands shook. "And if you don't come back?" He gave a half-smile. "Then fix what I break." As the countdown to confrontation ticked away, something changed inside her. The shame that had haunted her since birth burned away, replaced by a fierce clarity. These humans weren't fighting for power, they were fighting for principle. For her. No one had ever done that before. The Dominion ships began their descent. The ground shuddered as atmospheric shields flared to life. The human base, patched together with rust and determination, looked fragile beside the alien war machines, but it stood, humming with defiance. Sura watched from the control room, her heart in her throat. She could hear Elias's voice over the comms, calm and direct, guiding his people. There was no panic, no begging. Only commands and trust. He believed in her, in them, in the impossible. When the first shots hit, the entire station trembled. Power flickered. Systems screamed warnings. But humans didn't retreat, they adapted. Repairs began before the next strike landed. Sura's hands flew over the controls, rerouting energy, recalibrating shields. Every lesson Elias had taught her came rushing back. She wasn't a princess now. She was an engineer, and the station was her kingdom. Through the static, she heard his voice again. "Hold the line." She whispered it back, barely breathing. "Hold the line." Outside, Dominion ships fired relentlessly, but the station's countermeasures, half human, half her design, fought back with unexpected precision. The Emperor's fleet, built for dominance, found itself outmaneuvered by human improvisation and alien intuition combined. In the chaos, the Emperor sent a direct message, his voice booming across all frequencies. "You shame your blood, daughter. You fight for vermin." Sura stared at the transmission, trembling but unbroken. "I fight for those who see me," she whispered. "And that's something you never did." The words didn't reach him, but they didn't need to. Inside the control bay, alarms wailed, systems overloaded, yet no one stopped. Elias's team patched, rewired, reinforced. They weren't fighting to win, they were fighting to prove a point, that humanity's strength wasn't in weapons but in will. Hours stretched like lifetimes. The Dominion's arrogance began to crack. They hadn't expected resistance this fierce, this stubborn. Each human repair, each rerouted system, each pulse of shield regeneration was an act of rebellion. And at the heart of it all was Sura, once an object of ridicule, now the backbone of survival. When the final wave broke and the Dominion ships pulled back, damaged and humiliated, the station still stood. Barely. Smoke filled the corridors, systems flickered, but they were alive. Sura collapsed against the console, tears streaking her face. Elias's voice came through the comm, ragged but steady. "Told you," he said. "We don't give up what's ours." And as silence reclaimed the stars, she understood what made humans so feared. Not their technology, not their strength, but their refusal to break, even when the universe demanded it. The mechanic hadn't realized how much the alien woman had changed until the first time she laughed. It was small, uncertain, like a machine testing its first spark. But it broke something open inside him. For weeks, she had been working beside him silently, learning how to weld, how to repair circuits, how to calibrate pressure valves. She moved slower than humans, her large frame awkward, but her focus never wavered. When she finally spoke, her voice carried the softness of someone who had never been listened to. He found himself listening more than talking. They began to share meals in the corner of the workshop, bland rations for him, spiced fruits for her. He told her about the stars humans once called home, about oceans and winds she'd never felt. She told him about her world's emperor, her father, and how her size had made her a symbol of shame. Sent away as a political joke, she was told no human would ever find her worthy. The mechanic only nodded and said softly, "Their loss. You build things better than most men I know." For the first time, she smiled fully, unguarded and bright. Days turned into weeks, and the workshops slowly became a home. They fixed ships side by side, trading ideas and laughter. But the galaxy didn't care for small joys. One morning, the sirens wailed, a swarm fleet approaching. The alien Emperor's ships had come, and this time they weren't here for trade. They wanted Earth's outposts destroyed, and the daughter erased before her existence embarrassed the crown any further. When she saw the Imperial insignia on the scanners, her breath caught. "They've come for me," she whispered. But the mechanic was already moving, pulling tools, sealing blast doors, rerouting energy lines. "Then we'll make sure they regret it," he said. She stared at him in disbelief. "You'd fight them? For me?" He didn't answer. He just handed her a plasma wrench and began modifying a cargo loader into an improvised turret. As the first shockwaves hit the outpost shields, the entire base trembled. Human engineers scrambled to battle stations, and the mechanic barked orders like a commander. The alien woman joined him without hesitation, her strength suddenly vital. She lifted engine parts twice her weight, sealed ruptures, and braced failing walls. Together, they kept the shields alive long enough for the humans to ready the defense drones. But then the Emperor's personal command ship descended, massive, gold-plated, arrogant. A broadcast crackled through the comms. "Return the creature. You have no claim to royal property." The mechanic's jaw tightened. He turned to her. "You're not property." She shook, torn between fear and defiance. The Emperor's fleet opened fire. He could have fled, but he stayed, patching systems, welding under bombardment, refusing to let her surrender. "You taught me what worth means," he said as he handed her the control to the station's experimental reactor. "Now show them." She hesitated, hands trembling, but he nodded firmly. "You're not what they said you are. You're what you choose to be." She closed her eyes and activated the override. Power surged through the facility, light blooming from the reactors like a newborn star. The outpost's defensive field expanded tenfold, melting enemy projectiles midair. The Emperor's fleet reeled back, unprepared for the surge. She stood beside the mechanic, shoulders squared, no longer ashamed. For the first time, she wasn't the Emperor's daughter, she was a creator, an equal, a warrior. When the enemy finally retreated, the outpost lay battered but alive. The mechanic collapsed beside her, laughing through exhaustion. She looked at him, this grease-covered, stubborn human, and understood what he'd meant by worth. It wasn't measured by lineage or perfection. It was built, piece by piece, with hands that refused to give up. Word spread across the human colonies of the alien princess who fought beside a mechanic and saved a world. The Emperor's court denied it, but the truth had already burned through the stars. She wasn't a punchline anymore. She was proof that even the discarded could rise, and that humans, strange as they were, had a way of turning mockery into legend. And in the quiet after the storm, when the stars returned and the hum of the machine softened, the mechanic looked up at her and said, "Told you. You were never a joke." She smiled, tears in her eyes. "No," she said softly. "You made me real." The universe would remember her not as an emperor's shame, but as the one who stood with humanity and turned a joke into salvation. And beside her, the human who saw her worth when no one else did, the mechanic who refused to let the galaxy decide who deserved to shine. The galaxy learned of what happened on the remote human outpost, a tale that spread like static through deep space channels and encrypted frequencies. They called it a miracle, but those who were there knew better. It wasn't divine, it was defiance. The Emperor's ships limped home in silence, scarred by a single human mechanic and the daughter they had thrown away. And somewhere in the wreckage of that humiliation, an empire began to fracture. For the alien Emperor, the humiliation was unbearable. His daughter's survival was one thing, her alliance with a human was another. In his eyes, it was treason of blood. He ordered her name erased, her likeness destroyed, her existence struck from every record. But no amount of erasure could stop the message that spread. Humanity had not only stood against the Empire, they had made one of its own fight beside them, and win. The mechanic returned to work the day after the battle, his hands blackened, his voice hoarse. The outpost was half ruined, shields burned out, reactors barely stable. But where others saw wreckage, he saw something worth fixing. She stayed by his side, no longer uncertain, no longer ashamed. She wore a human engineer's badge now, the same grease stains smudging her hands. She didn't ask permission to belong, she had earned it. Together, they began rebuilding what had been destroyed. The other workers treated her differently now, not with pity or fear, but with respect. She could lift, weld, calibrate, and plan like she had been born in a workshop. The mechanic often caught her humming while she worked, something that hadn't happened before the battle. When he asked what it was, she said it was a song from her childhood, one she had forgotten until she found a reason to remember. Weeks passed, and the repair logs turned into blueprints. They weren't just fixing an outpost anymore, they were designing something new. A hybrid vessel, born of human ingenuity and alien precision. She had ideas no one else did, about stabilizing warp energy through gravitational layering, about balancing power flows by harmonizing biological algorithms with machinery. The mechanic didn't understand all of it, but he trusted her brilliance. When the prototype engine finally ignited, the outpost's walls trembled, but the readings stayed stable. It worked perfectly. They had built something that neither human nor alien minds alone could have conceived. And as the hum of the reactor filled the chamber, he looked at her and said quietly, "This is what they tried to throw away." She smiled, tired but radiant. "Then let them see what happens when you refuse to be discarded." The Emperor's council tried to suppress word of her survival, but spies and traitors carried whispers faster than light. Alien scholars spoke of the mechanic's princess, the one who forged peace through creation. Human admirals sent encrypted offers, proposing her technology as the foundation for a new fleet. She turned them all down. She didn't want a war, she wanted a purpose. And with the mechanic, she had found one. Still, they both knew the Empire wouldn't stay quiet forever. Pride was a powerful weapon, and wounded pride even more so. When the Emperor's envoys finally came, cloaked in formality and deceit, they offered a pardon and a return to royal life, under controlled conditions. She refused without hesitation. The mechanic didn't speak until they were gone. "You could have gone back," he said. "Had everything." She looked at him with calm certainty. "I already do." Months later, a human council delegation arrived to recognize her officially, not as a royal, not as an exile, but as a pioneer. The mechanic tried to stay out of the ceremony, uncomfortable with attention, but she insisted he stand beside her. When the insignia was placed on her chest, she said simply, "I didn't build this alone." The humans applauded, not realizing that in that moment, she was returning humanity's greatest gift, acceptance. As years passed, their creation, the hybrid vessel, became the backbone of a new fleet. It wasn't a warship. It was a ship of exploration, made to bridge worlds, to reach places that had remained uncharted. The first of its kind was named Unity's Hand. And on the day it launched, the mechanic stood in the dockyard, watching the glow of its thrusters fade into the void. She stood beside him, her eyes wet with emotion. It's beautiful, she whispered. He nodded. So are you. The Emperor died never knowing peace, his legacy crumbling under rebellion and truth. His daughter, once mocked as unworthy, became a symbol of what the galaxy could become when pride was replaced by purpose. The mechanic never sought credit, he just kept building, fixing, dreaming. And every time a new ship left port, bearing their shared signature design, he knew they had changed everything. In the quiet of the hangar, when the noise of engines faded and only the hum of life support remained, she often looked at him with the same awe as the first day he had defended her. You gave me a reason to fight, she once told him. You gave me a reason to believe, he replied. The galaxy didn't call it love, it called it evolution. Two beings from different worlds, forging something greater than either could alone. Their story wasn't one of romance or royalty, but of recognition, of seeing value where others saw waste, of building meaning from mockery. And so, long after their names faded from records and their faces became myth, the ships still bore an inscription near their cores, etched in small, unpolished letters. Built by hands that refused to give up. It became humanity's unspoken creed, the belief that worth isn't granted by birth or beauty, but forged in sweat, courage, and compassion. And in every hum of the reactors, in every shining hull that crossed the stars, their legacy lived on, the mechanic and the alien princess who turned a cruel joke into a revolution of hearts and steel.